So 422 was all about blood pressure, and you had to design an experiment to measure the blood pressure and the factors that affect it. But we're going to focus mainly just on the blood pressure and what it is. So blood pressure is measured with two numbers. So you have the systolic blood pressure, which is the top number. And that number is usually the higher the number because that's when the heart is contracting or beating. All right. And then the lower number is the diastolic, which is when the heart is at rest. All right. So what's happening here is we're closing off the blood so we can measure the pressure that the blood is flowing. And we're basically measuring the force on these arteries. So the larger the pressure, the more force on these arteries, which then can damage the arteries. And we'll talk about that in a second. So you want to keep this lower. So 140 is too high, which we'll talk about in a second also. And 90 is too high because that means both the arteries and the heart are getting overworked. All right, so we're just measuring the force on these. This is when it beats. 140 is when it beats. 90 is when it's at rest. So just talking about those blood pressures, so 140 over 90 would put you in the stage 1 hypertension, almost in stage 2, which just means you have more significant risk of having some kind of heart issue. All right, you should have a blood pressure less than 120 for systolic and less than 80 for your diastolic. And then if you get way too high here, that means there's definitely something going wrong, and you'll need to go to the ER to get that fixed, because your heart will basically just explode not explode, but it will get severely damaged if it's going that high. Alright, so the effects of high blood pressure is you can have an enlarged heart. That's called ventricular hypertrophy. So ventricular, because the ventricles are the ones that pump out, so those are the ones that going to withstand the most pressure here, specifically the left ventricle, because that is the one going out the aorta to the body. So that one has to pump the most. So generally that one's going to be the most effective. And then hypertrophy just means larger. Alright, so this is already a large muscle here. But it will just get larger as it gets more and more work. That's what muscles do. They get larger, but eventually it's not like a bicep or something. It will just eventually get worn out and get too large that will actually cause problems to the heart. Another problem here is that as the the arteries here, as the arteries get more and more pressure, you start to get damaged arteries and build up a plaque, and the arteries get harder, all right, called atherosclerosis, we'll talk about later. And this causes more blood pressure. So this is one of those positive feedbacks. The blood pressure goes up, which causes the arteries to get worse or harder. I'll just put worse, which then causes blood pressure to go up. This causes arteries to get worse, and it's just a compounding factor. So generally when you gotta catch your blood pressure early, because it will just keep increasing. Alright, so that is the main problem of high blood pressure. Now, you will get higher blood pressures when you work out, and other factors will affect your blood pressure, but those are just temporary, which is not bad. That's actually somewhat good for you because it increases the strength of your heart. But when you're constantly having high blood pressure, means high all the time, that's when you start getting damage to the arteries and the heart. All right, and that is pretty much all you need to know.